All right, we are live. So, welcome everybody who's taking time on Thursday afternoon, the 17th of November in 2022, as we are, I think, out of the pandemic for the most part, and most people are out without masks. I see a few here and there. I would like to introduce myself, Bill Miller, and uh, in the advisory role to the Cloud Voice Alliance. I hold the CEO success stories, and this is our fourth one, and the first one after the summer break with Eric Hernaez, who has recently been named the CEO of TeamMate Technologies, but he has quite a track record. He's a serial entrepreneur, longtime telecom industry veteran. He loves and is a strong believer in UCAS, new technologies, AI for business, and now, of course, Teams.
Of course.
And he has founded multiple companies. He's been not just the CEO multiple times, so he's not a rookie, as I write about in my book, lots of rookies. He's been a VP of marketing, he's been a COO, CTO, but I think he loves the CEO role, and he's going to talk to us today about that. He's also a board member and advisor to companies and an investor. He's an operational wizard. He's figured out over the years how to make these UCAS companies go, and he is an advocate for the customer, which is one thing. If you are not an advocate for your customer in the world today, you're dead. UX, user experience, is so important these days. So the way I like to ask questions is going to be kind of a fireside chat format. If you haven't been on my CEO success story webinars before, it is a fireside chat. There's no slides. This is question and answer. We like to have some fun. If you have any questions, you can certainly ask them in the chat. But for the moment, we are going to talk a little bit about Eric's journey. All the journeys to CEO are different. Everybody has a unique one. His road went through Telec and Sology back in 2006. And so that gives him, what, 16 going on 17 years of being the big man on campus. And I think he's going to share with us about his path to CEO and his journey, and hope everybody can learn from that. So, with that, I'd like to turn it over to you, Eric. You do your own introduction, and then we'll start with some other questions.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. First, I appreciate you putting on this series and having me. Glad to play a part, and look forward to some interesting back and forth. My name's Eric Hernaez. I'm currently the CEO of TeamMate Technology. And what we do is we make a tool that allows you to integrate Teams with any type of PBX. So as most of the world, at least in our industry, the communications industry is aware, Microsoft Teams is everywhere. And I think it was 270 million users, active daily users, last count. And they're getting into the telephone business. And so those of us in the telephone business see that as, if not a threat, at least, there's a question mark about what happens to the business. And so the idea behind Teams is you get to using our tool, which is really an integration product that allows you to use Teams the way you would use it in a normal everyday environment, but also turn it into your soft phone off of any PBX. Now, Microsoft's goal, of course, is to replace the PBX with Teams, and they're having some success with that. But there are many types of users and situations where Microsoft Azure PBX just won't work, and so for those many types of situations, TeamMate is the answer. So anyway, I've been in this role for a little more than a month, so it's pretty new to me. But it's a great market, and I'm looking forward to doing a lot with it.
Fantastic, Eric. Well, I'm sure the timing to get to take over a Teams-oriented company is not bad, because Microsoft has made tremendous inroads into smaller business, not just the enterprise now. So the first question, Eric, is tell us about when you first knew you wanted to become a CEO, and when you first realized that, how did you prepare?
Yeah. So, uh, you know, for the benefit of everyone out there, Bill was kind enough to send me these questions a couple days ago, and I, some of them I don't apply to me, but I'll do my best to answer them. I can honestly say I don't think I ever really aspired to be a CEO, ever. Uh, I'm just a guy that has ideas and a lot of ideas. Some of those ideas turn into businesses, and if you're in business, eventually somebody wants to know who's responsible for making the final decision. And so, wearing the CEO hat is just a necessary evil, in my opinion, because I don't particularly think I'm a great CEO, although, my businesses have had some success. Um, but, wearing the CEO hat is just a way to reduce the friction and ambiguity for business partners and customers about who makes the final decision. So all that to say, Bill, I don't think I ever really prepared to be a CEO, and probably still not prepared to this day.
So you prompted something there for me when you answered with somebody had to make the decision. I recently wrote a blog about decisions matter and came up kind of with the framework for decision making. And so one of the questions I want to throw in here for you is, since you have become the decision maker and that's how you became the CEO in some of your roles, do you have an automatic process that you see something that comes flying at you and you quickly just look at maybe two or three things, make a decision and move on? Or do you do a lot more analysis and ask a lot more questions about the detail?
I'm very much a kind of a gut feel kind of decision maker. So I believe, that although some decisions are difficult and you have to let them percolate, more often than not, I go with my gut.
Okay. So to me, by the way, when you go with your gut, it means you have an automatic decision making process programmed into your philosophy and style. Because you see certain things and you're ready to go, you're done. So that's
Yeah,
what I wrote the
I
blog
would
about.
agree with that. Sure.
Yeah, it's not everybody has that because people that are more analytical have a whole different perspective. It's a lot less gut and much more on data, as an
Of
example.
course. Yeah,
Okay,
I would agree with that.
so so along your way, since it's a great interesting story, as you were not aspiring to become a CEO, you just became one. um, who was your biggest influence over the years that inspired you, and how did they impact you?
Um, well, I'd have to say it was my father, and I think of myself more as an entrepreneur. I like to take risks and start new things. To me, building something from nothing is very challenging and enjoyable. And I guess I learned that from my dad, who's no longer with us, but he was actually a doctor, a plastic surgeon. It was not a that's not an easy thing to become. And shortly after he started his practice, he also started businesses. So he started throughout the years, dozens of different businesses, an airline, a shipping company, restaurants, all sorts of different stuff. Um, One in particular, which is relevant, he started a this was so anyway. I don't want to get too off track with the question. To answer your question, or a couple things I learned from my dad was the kind of the willingness or ability to take risks and go for it if you feel like you've got something to say or something to prove. Um, uh, Two things I remember my dad saying all the time. Whenever he was going to do something new, was nothing ventured, nothing gained, and it's only money. And so I find myself saying that to myself all the time, throughout my life as well. So
Hmm.
I owe that to my dad. The other thing I learned from my dad, though, which is maybe it was not the most, maybe I guess you'd call it a flaw, was he was extremely cheap. He was like the cheapest guy I ever met. And uh, and what that meant was that when he started these businesses of his, he would hire the cheapest, employees he could find. And being his son, I was often that was me. so, so, so I got to, I got to be involved in almost all his businesses in one way or another as an employee, and that taught me a lot too. There was this one business in particular, which is, kind of along the lines of what I've been doing, throughout my careers. And this was when I was in high school. I think I was a freshman or maybe a sophomore in high school. He got the idea to start a teletype service bureau, right? And for those of you who don't know, a teletype is kind of like a telegraph, except there's a little keyboard, and what happens is, just like a telegraph, you go to an office and tell them what you want to say, and they type it out, and it would go, across phone lines to another part of the world, and then they print it out. So anyway, this was a business of his where he rented an office. He got an 800 number. He rented this teletype machine, and he made me sit there every day and wait for the phone to ring. And every once in a while, the phone did ring, and then I'd have to, um, you know, take the message and type it out in the teletype machine and send it off. And it wasn't the business wasn't around for very long. Big surprise. But I was the only employee, and as a I don't know if I was 16 or 17 years old. I mean, I learned what I learned from that was, you got to hire the right people. You have to have you can't skimp. And many people would say that I'm like my father and that I'm cheap in some ways. But one thing I do know is that you can't skimp on good people. So that's what I learned from my dad.
Very, very interesting. Over the, I'd say over let's talk the 16 or so years that you've been a CEO or CXO. What are the top couple of challenges, two or three challenges that you overcame on your way to create these successful companies? And you have had some good successes.
Yeah. So I actually started my first company in 1999 when I was 22. And no, is that right? Maybe I was 24. But anyway, I was a lawyer before that, and through I worked as a lawyer, or actually I worked in my first in the technology industry. My first 2 years, I worked as a lawyer for a technology company. So I was in-house counsel, and I was very green out of school, didn't know much, but I know I liked technology, and I found myself a job at an internet service provider company, and they made me the company lawyer. And you know, I learned a few things there, and then from there I went to work for an equipment manufacturer. Actually, it was a maker of voice over IP gateways, the very, very first ones. Um, but that whole process, those two jobs, was about 4 years before I started my first company. So that was 1999, and
Mhm.
I, the challenge for me, and this was particular to, I mean, specific to my circumstances, was that I had come from a legal background. My circle of friends, the people I associated with, were mostly friends from law school or people I knew in the legal community in Philadelphia where I lived. And so I didn't have I didn't have a big network of people to hire from and for this company. And so it was a challenge finding like-minded people who were good at what they did. I'd say that was probably the biggest challenge when I first went out on my own. And you mentioned 2006. I actually, it's interesting. In my first company, and it was a different world back then. I felt like I was too young and that people wouldn't take me seriously as the quote unquote CEO. So I went out and hired a CEO, an older guy who I thought people would take more seriously. I mean, it was a very product driven company, and it was, my idea that was driving the product. So I was still basically calling the shots, but my title wasn't CEO. But so I've basically been doing it since then, and that's gotten easier through the years. As you build up a network and you have a track record, and people get to know you, and it's been easier to find people to start businesses with, and to fill the roles that need to be filled. But those were the biggest challenges for me personally.
Okay, interesting. The network is an interesting one, right? Because a lot of people who go into voice over IP or the gateway business that you were in, or UCAS or call centers, whatever, they come from the industry and they have people that they've worked for before, and they become part of their team moving forward. It's certainly the best of them. So that I can see that challenge. That's a tough one. And also I've seen the youngest one right now. I do consult with aspiring and first year CEOs, and some of them are very young, Gen Zs. There's
Hmm.
a question later about Gen Z, but it's interesting because they don't have a lot of knowledge, and so there's no roadmap, right?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think certainly back then, 20 however many years ago, I feel like it was a little different. I mean, you have people like Mark Zuckerberg, right? Kind of as a template,
Yeah.
young guy, quit college, started his own company, made it into one of the largest ones in the world, and at least it's not. There is kind of a template out there, but yes, it's difficult when you're
Yeah.
young and you don't have a network.
Well, there was a handful of them, right? Gates, Gates is a dropout. Michael Dell is a dropout. Zuckerberg is a dropout, but they're all smart people, right?
Right, right.
So,
Very few of those.
so you've talked a little bit about your decision process and things like that. Talk about your leadership style in the current market that you're in, which includes Microsoft now and Teams, but it's really UCAS and PBXs and all of this stuff. There's a lot of competition, a lot, and companies of all sizes, small, medium, and large. How would you define your leadership style and how it's differentiated from your peers?
Well, when I saw this question, I of course went to Google and Googled leadership styles to try and figure out what mine was. And I mean, I have an idea, but I just didn't, I didn't have the bucket to put it into. But let me start by saying I don't see myself as a particularly strong leader, and if you make a list of, the best qualities in leaders, I feel like I fall short on many of them. I'm not a great communicator. I'm not a good mentor. I'm so focused on what I'm doing. It takes energy and work for me to change my focus and help those around me. Although I realize the importance of it. Not charismatic, but what I feel like I can do is to get people in line behind a vision and a mission, and then that's what I've been able to do a couple times, and and kind of be the inspiration for let's go achieve this, and then once you have that, I feel like I'm also good at just letting people succeed in their own space. I see my job as a CEO is really as being able to make the people around me successful. Remove obstacles for them, help them really do the best that they can do in their roles. And I feel like I do a pretty good job of that. A lot of time. I mean, really, the CEO, if you will, it's all about just resource allocation. Especially in a startup. Resources are scarce, and how you allocate those resources among the many different things that you could be doing and the ideas that are that percolate throughout an organization, it pretty much defines whether you're going to be successful or not. And so being able to manage that process, and number one, having the team, and just trusting them to do what you've hired them to do and helping them to do it, I think are my strengths. So Google would say that I'm a inspirational, laissez-faire leader.
Okay, that's fair. So So in my work with CEOs, especially new ones, first year ones, they have a hard time letting go of the function that they came from, and they don't delegate well, and they don't trust people to do the job. They do it themselves because they think it could be faster. And every single time that impacts the company success, it slows down. If they have a great product and or service, it slows down the company's success because they get in their own way.
Of course, yeah,
So
yeah.
I know that we had this question on our panel a couple of years ago, but the superpower that you really have is the way you and your people would tell you this, that you let them do their job. That's really the superpower you bring to the table. That's a very important leadership trait. One
I
of the most
I
important.
I agree with that, and you know, a lot of that just comes from, you know, hard knocks, right? Experience,
Mhm.
figuring out, you know, what it is that works and what it is that doesn't work, and coming up with a formula that kind of works.
So that segues into my next question, which is about the culture that you create in your companies. So you've had several companies now that you've been part of, and again, some very successful ones. How how does your philosophies and leadership styles impact the company culture, and how would you define your culture? Like, let's say you're the new CEO now at TeamMate Technologies, even though you knew the people, you knew a lot of the people before, if not all of them. So there's a culture that existed there before you. So now that you're the leader, does that culture change? How would you define the culture of that team?
Um, well, you know, of course, early on, you know, you don't, or in the first couple companies I started, I didn't really give too much thought to the culture, you know, but now, you know, I find it is, you know, a fairly important thing to define. Um, might be a little too soon for me to say I've had any impact on the culture at Teammate. It's only been a month,
Okay.
but I would say, you know, what it boils down to for me is just authenticity. Be authentic. You know, don't, if you don't know something, don't be afraid to say you don't know it. If you make a mistake, own it. Don't be afraid, you know, to say I made a mistake, right? And obviously, you know, that can't happen too many times in, you know, otherwise you're just not going to be successful regardless of what you do. But you know, with the idea that you bring some value to the table, and that you're good at whatever it is that your job happens to be, then don't be afraid to say I don't know. Let me find out, and don't be afraid to say, oh, I made a mistake. Let me fix it. Um, you know, and it's not just at the individual level. Of course, culture permeates an organization, and that has to be the face of the organization also. You know, at SkySwitch, my previous company, uh, I think probably one of the most important things that I was able to do there was to bring that culture to the forefront, and uh, really, and the job, you know, SkySwitch was a white label provider, so we were the platform for a lot of UCaaS resellers. And you know, when you're in that situation where companies depend on your platform for their livelihood, there's a lot of pressure because, you know, when the platform doesn't work, especially in telecommunications, as you know, when the phones don't work, all hell breaks loose, right? And so, you know, it's very important that things are working, you know, five nines, as they say. So when we first started out, you know, there would invariably be hiccups and problems, and a lot of times, you know, you know, we'd be on Slack, and whoever would say, "Oh, nobody's noticed," you know, thumbs up, you know, because we had a problem and nobody noticed, and you know, I had to fight early on to say, listen, it doesn't matter if nobody noticed. You know, it's very important that we own up to it, and announce that, you know, we had a problem and this is what we did and this is what we're doing. And that was very deliberate because we wanted to earn the trust of our customers, of our resellers, and being able to it's not easy to admit you made a mistake, especially when it's a dumb mistake that you should have known better from. But I really believe that was one of the things that made SkySwitch successful, is that when we made mistakes, we didn't wait for somebody to call up and say, "Hey, are you having a problem?" We would, as a matter of fact, I would make it a point to blast an email out there describing the problem before anybody called. That to me was a success.
Mhm.
And it's reassuring. It's been 2 years since the company was bought, and I still see that culture remains at SkySwitch, and it makes me very happy. I think that was a
It's
good
good.
thing.
Well, I think most successful cultures do have transparency, authenticity, and trust at the top of their core list of the culture. Some companies write it down. Some companies put it on the back of business cards. Some
Hmm.
companies put it on the website. But those are key attributes, key traits of a solid culture. People help each other, and especially the customer. So that's all good. That's excellent answer. So so the next question, Eric, is one of my favorite new ones that I am asking, and I did give you a peek into it the other day, so you could think about it. Um, Over the next couple of years, between now that we've had uh, at least one major candidate announce his presidential candidacy, and several others will follow. The next 2 years, the presidential election is going to be forefront in our country and could potentially impact businesses in multiple ways. Maybe security issues on UCAS networks, maybe just a divided people throughout your company. How do you predict your CEO challenges and maybe other CEO challenges that may be on this call over the next couple of years as we come up to 2024?
Yeah, that's a tough question for me. I don't know that I have a great answer. The obvious one, of course, is we're in a very inflationary period, and what people expect, what the public expects, in terms of future inflation, has a great deal of impact import on businesses today. Right, we see all of the layoffs that are happening across the technology industry because uh, people expect growth to slow over the next year or so. Um, so you really can't ignore that, and you kind of have to have some sort of playbook for what you're going to do. And as a business owner, it affects you on both sides, right? You have employees who have higher cost of living, so they want bigger salaries, and you have customers who are being squeezed as well, and they want lower prices. And so you sort of have to navigate your way between that, and come up with a solution that satisfies uh, both sides. Now, as it happens, in the UCAS industry, I think we have a little bit of an easier time, only because UCAS, if sold the right way, is money saving number one and productivity enhancing number two, right? So you can say, this is a good decision for you, Mr. Business Owner, to go to go to the cloud, to accelerate your digital transformation, because it will make you more efficient, and ultimately, be good for the bottom line, which is what everybody is looking at these days. On the other hand, another aspect of that is, as a CEO and a business owner, many of my co-CEOs out there are looking, or have been looking, to sell their business, right? And so being able to sell your business in this environment becomes considerably more difficult, because as the cost of money goes up, the valuation of future earnings, the value of future earnings go down, and as a result, your valuation is affected. Um, so both of those things, for better or worse, are tied to different political parties. So I think we'll see depending on which side comes out ahead, we'll see movement in along those lines.
Well, the battle has started. I mean, it's going to be fun. I don't
I
know
don't
if
know if it'll
that's the
be
right
fun.
word, but
It will be interesting and
be
entertaining,
interesting.
maybe, but
Yeah, I'm sure. Um, okay, so let's move to the lighter side of things. um, do you personally have morning or evening routines that help you stay sharp and focused to lead your business? And have these changed over the years for you personally?
yeah, there's a couple things that I think just help me to perform better. One is meditation. I like to take time every morning, before the phone starts ringing, and preferably when it's dark out and nobody else is up, to just sit and contemplate and meditate. Um, and then the other is no secret, just sweating. If I don't get a good sweat on, at least a few times a week, I definitely feel more lethargic, both physically and mentally. So, uh, you know, how these have changed over the years, I think really just as you get older, right? Everything gets a little harder, and so the importance of things that make life easier and uh, you know, uh, the importance of these things just become more apparent, right? So you put more importance and emphasis on them.
Got to stay healthy, man.
Yeah, of course. I
So,
just, uh, I twisted my ankle, so I haven't been able to do anything pretty much for the past 6 weeks, and it's hurting.
oh, that's pretty difficult.
Yeah,
So, do you use LinkedIn or other social media to benefit your business? And if so, how?
yeah. Well, I think social media is hugely important for any business, but particularly if you're a startup or if you're a business that does not have a big marketing budget, you can do wonders for yourself on LinkedIn in particular, and depending on the type of business, other social media as well. Um, so yeah, I mean, do I use it to its utmost potential? No, but I aspire to, and I think everybody should.
Yeah. Okay. So, what advice would you give to other CEOs who may be struggling with personnel issues, acquiring new customers, or other day to day challenges based on where we are in 2022, moving into 2023, with all those challenges you mentioned just a short while ago?
I think the biggest, or the most salient advice I I have really is to, and this is I hesitate to say this because it's a hot button issue, but I take advantage of outsourcing. You have to be able uh, to so outsourcing is always a hot topic issue, and the on the one side, it's it increases efficiency and you can get the same job done for a lot less in another country. On the other side is that you know we shouldn't be exporting our jobs and it's not good for the country. Personally, I don't I've never I've been, well, start off by saying, I guess, that I spent my childhood and living in the Philippines. I'm a dual citizen. My dad was Filipino, so I've never really had that qualm about you know the you know about outsourcing in that way, because I always felt like the Philippines was a home to me also. But I've been outsourcing to the Philippines since 1999, since my very first business, and to me that's been a key part of my personal recipe for success, is being able to do that. But today, um, if you're not doing it, you're doing yourself a disservice because your competitors are, right? And so there, no matter what type of business you're in, there's an opportunity for you to reduce costs and get the job done just as well. And it's difficult for many CEOs just because it's unknown, and especially if it's in a country that you're not familiar with. Um, but you know my advice is that it's worth exploring and trying to figure out a way to make work, because at the end of the day, again, it's important for competition. And then, my particular experience has been in the Philippines, but there are many great places to outsource and find good workers. But especially in today's, age of quiet quitting, and just the general displeasure that many in the younger generation have about work, that for the most part is not happening in other countries. And so you can find people who genuinely appreciate the job, and are just want to to make a difference and add value to their role. And so it's refreshing in a lot of ways.
Okay, interesting. Based on everything we've talked about so far, what advice would the Eric of November 2022 give to the Eric of 2000?
Yeah. Well, so I talked about how I came out of I was a lawyer and living in Philadelphia, and for some unknown reason, I decided to start a software company, in 1999. A crazy idea, since I had very little, you know, I, I was into technology when I was in law school, and I took some programming classes, but I didn't know the first thing about, the software business really, but I did it. So uh, what I wish I'd done is I wish I'd moved to Silicon Valley, right? I wish I'd gone to a place
Oh,
where everybody was doing it, and it was part of the lifeblood, because I was really a kind of a fish out of water on the East Coast in the internet business at the time, and so that's a I won't say it's a regret. I try not to have any regrets, but I think that would have been a good move if I could go back in time. Uh, the other piece of advice I'd give myself is, my first business I started in 1999, and it went until 2010, 2011, and way longer than it should have gone. And this was my first business, and actually, you know, midway through that time in 2006, we had new investors come in and change the name of the company, but it was really the same business, same people. But honestly, I should have folded that company way before I did, and my mindset at the time was, if there's any way in hell I can make this thing work, I'm gonna do it. And my relationship suffered, everything really suffered, and I was putting in 18-hour days. It was very, very difficult, and at the end of the day, it just wasn't a great business. I mean, I was putting in so much for it. I mean, we were making payroll, we were making it, but we weren't, making it with a capital M. And so I wish I'd pulled the plug on it sooner and moved on to the next thing, because you know when you're in that moment, it seems like nothing can be worse than admitting defeat. And like, I just can't do this. My whole identity was wrapped up in it. And then after it happens, it's like, oh, what a relief. That's finally over. I can do something else, and so I wish I'd known that sooner.
interesting. So you've already shared a couple of these, but what's one factoid that no one really knows about you that you can't share with us? You just did something. One. Give us another one.
Well, we had this talk before, but I still feel like it's one of my other secrets to success, which is I can sleep anywhere. I can sleep standing up, and you know, to me, it's great to be able to catch a quick nap, even if it's just 2 minutes, and feel refreshed. Before a meeting, right before a phone call, and so that's it.
You sleep on airplanes then, right?
Of
Trains,
course,
airplanes.
I'm asleep before the wheels go up.
All right, so we're down the home stretch now, and in the last three questions of the lightning round. The first one is a familiar question. It's, since the pandemic started and everyone went remote, work from home in March of 2020. What's the one thing in your life that has changed permanently?
So this is a in in my early businesses, I spent a ton of time traveling. I've been, easily a million miles, 35 countries, a lot of time traveling. And the end result of that is that I don't really like traveling anymore. And I used to keep that to myself because everybody loves to travel, right? But you know, now after the pandemic, and a lot because of the pandemic, people can relate to not enjoying traveling. So I put it right out there. I say, I don't like to travel, and I'm not going to do it unless I absolutely have to.
That's a good one. I like that one. And I think that's true for a lot of people since the pandemic started. What so this is the Gen Z question. Personally, I'm a strong supporter of multi-generational companies where you have different ideas, different experience levels, different perspectives, uh, gives you a stronger group perspective. So, what is one piece of advice that you would give a new hire Gen Z, meaning 25 or under, to your company for them to be successful?
Yeah, this is an easy one. I think for the younger generation who are just entering the workforce, it's never been easier to stand out from the crowd, right? I mean, there's so much. I wouldn't call it pressure, but maybe the kind of the the general mentality is to look out for injustices and call them out, and you know not to um, just let them go by. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but businesses, for better or worse, are there to make money. And so if your goal is to move up in a company and to be successful in that company, whatever company you happen to find yourself in, don't lose sight of that fact. You're not there to I mean, and I'll try to be as politically correct as possible. You're not there to, nobody's hiring you to be a cultural warrior. So, you know, don't lose sight of that fact, and be aware that, whether it's fair or not, your progression through a company depends on people, right? And people are wired a certain way. So, your boss, whoever that happens to be, will be more likely to uh, give you a raise or a promotion if they know you. That means they have to be familiar with you. So go to the office if you have a chance to be around the people who will make a difference in your life. Try and spend as much time with them as possible. Yeah, I mean, everybody wants that plum remote work job and to not have to go to the office. But the it's easy to stand out if you're at the office, right? And you're there with the decision makers. You're going to have a better chance at moving up the company ladder. Um, so I'll end it there. But along those lines, there's a whole litany of things that the younger generation kind of expects from work or their work life. And it's easy to stand out from that if you do things just slightly differently, with the mindset that this company is here for a reason. It has shareholders, and the shareholders expect the company to make a profit. And you know your parents' retirement depends on these companies that are in their 401ks being profitable. So don't don't lose sight of that, I guess.
That's an interesting answer. I hadn't heard that one before by anybody. I did attend a webinar recently, a LinkedIn Live webinar from a Gen Z group. There's a couple of very active groups on LinkedIn. And in their particular survey that had a fairly sizable sample, the Gen Zs were at the top of the list for wanting hybrid work specifically for that reason, so they could go in and build relationships and learn more about the business. There is a challenge, I think, in today's world with all the layoffs, for example, that if you're too loud and too obnoxious about some of the hot topics, then it could put you on the wrong list. So you have to be very careful with how you bring up those topics. But you should, it doesn't mean you shouldn't, as you said. You just have to be super careful. and don't go around with a big flag, and wear the political T-shirts and whatever side you're on. But it's okay to feel, uh, that you represent a specific group and to share your ideas. But you do have to be careful for the reasons you said.
Yeah. Of
Yeah.
course, I think it all just boils down to remembering why you even have a job, right? What that company is there for a
Right.
reason, and if you join the company, you in theory agree with their reason or philosophy, and so be mindful of that.
Right. And then the last question: what is the last book that you read, and how has it helped you?
So this was a tough one because I generally read for entertainment, escapism, I guess. So I had to flip back through my Kindle library a couple of months to. I generally have two or three books going at a time, but the last one that where I felt like I learned something was it was called A Gentleman in Moscow, and
Huh.
it was a historical fiction piece about the somebody who was. Uh, it happened during the Russian Revolution, so 1918 to 1923, and this guy was sentenced to live his life in a luxury hotel, and so it was just him viewing the happenings of Russia during that time period, and I'd never really studied or known much about that period in Russian history, so I learned a lot from it.
That's good. That's a good one. So, Eric, I want to thank you very much for taking your time to prepare for this with me and to actually do it. Um, the Cloud Voice Alliance, for which you are a founding member, so you know it quite well. Uh, and I would like to thank you for your insights as well. So, this is the second time you and I have done something. We did a panel at IT Expo a couple of years ago, and I think your tips are great, and other people can learn from them. And that is the intent of the CEO Success webinar series, is for people to learn from other people. And you could sit there as much as you want and say you're not a great CEO, but other people that I know say otherwise. So whatever you're doing well and successfully. So and maybe that's just your leadership style and the culture that you create, but it's all it's all really positive feedback. So thanks for everybody who showed up and stayed to the end. This will be the recording will be available shortly, and I believe that Jeff Dawkins sets it up on the same link for the replay for anyone who wants to see it, or if you want to pass it on to someone else. And next month, on the 15th of December, James Smith, who is the chief connector of Universal Connectivity in West Hartford, Connecticut, will be our guest. And I think that'll be fun because that's a different perspective than Eric's. He's in the Northeast, which is different than the Southeast. As we know, the regions of the country are very different. You mentioned Silicon Valley. I didn't move to Silicon Valley, but I worked in Silicon Valley for a couple of years at a startup, uh, and that was life changing for me. So, anyway, again, thanks everybody. Thank you, Eric, and we may see many of you who are on here at IT Expo in February, but please join us. We'll be posting on the same channels the link for the James Smith uh, CEO Success Story webinar. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot, Bill. It's been fun.
You bet. Take care, Eric. Bye.